Alright, so I have no idea how to even start this, but here goes nothing. I, 34F, have been married to Steve, 36M, for 12 years. We have 3 kids, 2 boys, 1 girl, ages 10, 7 and 4. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but whose is? We built a life together, and I thought we were a team. But lately, something has been off. Steve started pulling away about a year ago. At first, I thought it was just work stress. He's in finance, and I know the job can be demanding. But then he started staying out late. Missing dinner. Always busy. And the phone? Oh my God, don't get me started. He used to be careless, leaving it lying around, open. Now? It's always in his pocket, face down, locked with a password he never had before. And when I asked about it, work emails. Sure, because work emails suddenly need a fingerprint scan and face recognition? I tried to tell myself I was overthinking it, that I was being one of those wives. So I let it go. I even booked myself a solo cruise, a week to relax and reset. Something for me for once. Steve was supportive, even a little too enthusiastic about me leaving. You deserve this, Em, he kept saying. Well, joke's on me, because guess what? I never got on that cruise. Why? Because Steve disappeared. Literally. Gone. No warning, no text, nothing. 1 minute, I'm packing my bags and getting ready to head to the port. The next? He's MIA. No answer to calls, straight to voicemail. No texts. No note. Just gone. So there I am, standing in our living room, suitcase still in hand, 3 kids looking up at me like, where's Dad? And I have no freaking answer. I check with his job. No, he didn't call in sick. No, he didn't show up. No, they have no idea where he is. I even called his mother, who, by the way, doesn't like me much. Even she sounded confused. So now, instead of sipping a cocktail on the deck of a cruise ship, I'm home, alone with 3 kids, wondering if my husband just walked out on us. Or worse. But the more I think about it, the more I wonder, did he leave? Or was he with someone else? Because looking back, there were signs. Signs I ignored. And now I can't stop thinking, was my husband cheating on me before he vanished into thin air? So there I was, standing in my living room, suitcase still packed, kids staring at me like I had all the answers. Spoiler alert, I didn't. I kept calling Steve's phone. Voicemail. Again. And again. And again. My stomach felt like it was full of rocks. I tried texting. Me, where are you? Me, call me now. Me, Steve, this isn't funny. Nothing. I should have been panicking, right? Like, calling hospitals, filing a missing persons report. But if I'm being honest, my first thought wasn't is he okay? It was did he finally do it? Because deep down, I already knew. I knew something had been wrong for months. I just didn't want to admit it, the signs were there. They were so there. The phone situation, like I said, locked 24/7. And when I did manage to glance at his screen, nothing but work emails and texts from his boss. Like, only his boss. Who the hell just texts their boss? Not even a single text from a friend? Or a woman? The late nights, work dinner, client meeting, traffic. I bought every excuse. Like an idiot. But now? I realize, when did these dinners start lasting till 2 a.m.? The distance. Conversations that used to be easy turned into one-word answers. He started watching TV in the other room instead of sitting with me. I'd ask about his day, and he'd grunt. I even remember one time, a few months ago, when I reached for his hand while we were watching a movie, and he actually flinched. Like my touch bothered him. That one should have been my wake-up call. But no, I convinced myself he was just tired. The final clue. One morning, I woke up before him and saw his phone sitting on the nightstand. I don't even know what got into me, but I grabbed it. And guess what? It was locked. For the first time in our entire marriage. That was the moment something in me broke. And now here I was, staring at my kids, lying through my teeth. Daddy must have had an emergency at work. I felt sick. Because I knew. I knew. And the worst part? I had no idea if he was ever coming back. I tried to keep it together for the kids, but inside, my brain was spinning. My husband, my loving, responsible, devoted husband, had just vanished. I wasn't about to sit around and wait. So, I did what any wife in my position would do. I started digging, called Steve's work one more time, hoping maybe I'd get a different answer. His assistant, Rachel, picked up. Me, "Hey Rachel, sorry to bug you again, but, has Steve checked in?" Rachel, "No, he didn't show today." A pause. Then, she lowered her voice. "Rachel, Emily, are you okay? You sound." Me, "I'm fine. Just, let me know if you hear from him, okay?" I hung up before she could ask more. If Steve did run off, I figured money would leave a trail. So I logged into our joint account. My heart stopped. There was a $2,000 withdrawal from an ATM downtown, the night before he disappeared. And that wasn't all. Another charge, a fancy hotel. Not just any hotel. One of those boutique expensive places that people book for romantic getaways. Oh my God. My hands started shaking. I clicked to check past transactions. There it was. A pattern. Dinners. Uber rides. More hotels. And all of it? Late at night. How long had this been going on? Months? A year? I felt like I couldn't breathe. Steve and I used to have our locations shared. Used to. Of course, he had turned his off. But our kids' iPads were linked to his Apple ID. I opened the Find My app. And there it was. His last known location? The freaking hotel. He never planned to be here when I left for my cruise. He made sure of it. Steve didn't disappear. He ran. And I had a very, very strong feeling that he wasn't alone, sat there staring at the screen, my heart pounding so hard it felt like my ribs might crack. The hotel. He was at a hotel. While I was supposed to be getting on a cruise, my husband was off doing what? Who? I wasn't about to sit around and wait for answers. I grabbed my keys, told the kids I had to go find Daddy, and drove straight there. It was a nice hotel. The kind with fancy glass doors and a valet who looks at you like you don't belong there. I walked straight to the front desk, my hands shaking. Me, "Hi, my husband is staying here. Steve, last name. Can you ring his room?" The woman at the desk smiled. "I'm sorry, but I can't give out guest information." "Oh, I bet you can't." Me, "Look, I just need to know if he's here. It's urgent." She hesitated, glanced at her screen, then back at me. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I can't help you." But that tiny glance? That was everything. He was here. I stepped back, scanning the lobby. There were 2 elevators. A couple checking in. A man in a suit scrolling his phone. And then, a blonde woman walking toward the elevators alone, dressed in one of those silky dresses that looked straight out of a Victoria's Secret catalog. And guess what she had in her hand? A key card. My stomach flipped. I didn't even think, I just followed her. She got into the elevator, and at the last second, I stepped in right behind her. She didn't even look at me. Just pressed the 9th floor. Bingo. I watched as she stepped out, turned left, and walked down the hall. My legs moved before I could stop them. She stopped in front of room 918. Pulled out her key card. And that's when I lost it. Me, HEY. She froze. Turned around slowly, confused. Do I know you?" My hands were shaking. I could barely hear myself over the blood rushing in my ears. "You're sleeping with my husband." Her eyes went wide. What? I was done playing games. I pointed straight at the door. "Is Steve in there?" She swallowed, her whole face turning red. Then, before she could stop me, I pounded on the door. Me, "Open the door, Steve. Right now." Silence. I pounded again, harder. "I know you're in there." The blonde, whoever she was, kept saying, "Oh my God, I didn't know, I swear I thought he was," but I wasn't listening. Because right then, the door unlocked. And there stood Steve. Shirtless. Hair messy. Looking at me like he'd just seen a ghost, there he was. Steve. Shirtless, standing in the doorway of a hotel room, staring at me like he couldn't believe I was real. Oh, it was real, all right. For a second, we just stood there. No one spoke. Not me. Not Steve. Not her. Then slowly he ran a hand through his messy hair and muttered, "Emily, what are you doing here? What am I doing here? What am I doing here?" I let out a laugh, sharp, ugly, almost insane. That's what you have to say? My voice came out too loud, too high-pitched. Not Emily, I can explain, or Emily, this isn't what it looks like. Just what are you doing here? Steve glanced at the blonde woman, who, by the way, looked about 25, then back at me. Can we talk about this somewhere else? Oh, now he wanted privacy. I shoved past him and stormed into the room. The bed? Unmade. There was an ice bucket on the dresser, half melted, next to 2 wine glasses. A woman's heels kicked off near the closet. I felt sick. Steve grabbed my arm, but I yanked away. Don't you dare touch me. Behind me, the blonde woman, who still hadn't given me her name, started babbling. I swear I didn't know he was married. He told me he was. Shut up. I wasn't even looking at her anymore. My eyes were locked on him. Because suddenly, I realized something. Steve wasn't panicked. He wasn't apologizing. He wasn't begging me to understand. He just stood there, staring, like he had nothing to say. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a drunken accident. Steve had planned this. He knew exactly what he was doing. Something inside me snapped. I turned, grabbed the wine glass off the dresser, and before I could even think, hurled it at the wall. It shattered into a million pieces. The blonde let out a little scream. Steve's jaw clenched. Jesus, Emily. Don't you Jesus Emily me. I screamed. You liar. You let me stand in our house, raising our kids, while you, my voice cracked. I swallowed hard. How long, Steve? His mouth pressed into a thin line. It's complicated. Complicated. I let out a breathless laugh. You're unbelievable. I turned to the blonde, who was still clutching her purse like it was a life vest. You want to know what's complicated? I was supposed to be on a cruise right now. My husband encouraged me to go, practically pushed me out the door. My hands curled into fists. Because he wanted me gone. The blonde's face fell. Oh my God. I looked back at Steve. He wouldn't meet my eyes. That's when I knew. This wasn't the first time. This wasn't some fling. My marriage was already over. And the worst part? He didn't even have the decency to fight for it, stood there in that hotel room, staring at the man I had built a life with, the father of my children, the person I thought was my partner. And he just stood there, silent. No excuses. No explanations. No Emily, please let me fix this. Just nothing. The blonde, who still hadn't given me her name, shifted awkwardly, looking between us like she had just realized she walked into a burning building. She started, then stopped. Then, like the coward she was, she grabbed her purse and bolted barefoot down the hall. I didn't care. She wasn't the problem. Steve was. I took a deep breath. My voice was eerily calm. How long? Steve finally let out a breath, rubbing his jaw. Emily, let's not do this here. Wrong answer. I laughed. Actually laughed. Oh, you don't want to do this here? So now you care about where we have this conversation. He ran a hand down his face like I was exhausting him. Like I was the problem. Something inside me snapped. I grabbed his shirt from the floor and threw it at his chest. How long? Steve exhaled hard through his nose. Then finally, he looked me in the eye. 8 months. Everything inside me froze. 8 months. Not a mistake. Not a one-time thing. Not some fling he regretted. 8 months. I swayed on my feet. My ears started ringing. It felt like the floor was falling out from under me. Steve took a step forward. Emily, listen. I flinched so hard he stopped mid-step. My whole body recoiled like he had hit me. Like I couldn't even stand to be near him. His face twisted. Don't call me that. My voice came out so sharp, so hollow, it didn't even sound like mine. His hands dropped to his sides. And then, clear as day, the worst thought I had ever had in my life crossed my mind. Had he brought her to our house? I swallowed hard. Did our kids meet her? Steve's whole body stiffened. Oh my God. They had. I actually stumbled backward. Like the wind had been knocked out of me. He let our children meet his mistress. The betrayal was so deep, so vile, I felt like I was going to throw up. Steve stepped forward again, his voice softer now. Emily, let's just go home and talk about this. I shook my head. I don't have a home, Steve. Not with you. His face fell. And right then I knew, he thought he could fix this. He thought he could explain it away. But this? This was unforgivable. I turned on my heel and walked out. And Steve? He didn't even try to stop me. I don't even remember leaving the hotel. One second I was standing in that godforsaken room, and the next I was in my car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The world outside blurred. My brain was buzzing, replaying everything over and over. 8 months. Our kids met her. He didn't even try to stop me. I should have been crying, screaming, something. But I just felt numb, like my body hadn't caught up to what had just happened. Then, halfway home, my phone buzzed. I glanced down. Steve. I let it ring. Once. Twice. Then I picked up. Me, what? There was a long pause. Then, Emily, I didn't want you to find out like this. I actually laughed. A sharp, broken sound. Oh really? How exactly did you want me to find out, Steve? Were you waiting for our anniversary? Silence. I pulled in a sharp breath. You let her meet our kids. Steve exhaled. That wasn't. Don't lie to me. More silence. Then quietly, it wasn't like that. Oh, wasn't it? My voice cracked at the end. What was it like then, Steve? Explain it to me. How do you justify introducing your mistress to our children? He sighed. I didn't introduce her as that, Emily. I wouldn't. I scoffed. So what, she was just Daddy's friend? Something like that. I nearly threw my phone. This man. This pathetic, weak excuse of a man. You know what, Steve? My voice was ice cold. You made this decision, so now you're gonna live with it. Emily. I hung up. And for the first time since I left the hotel, I felt something. Not sadness. Not pain. Rage. By the time I pulled into the driveway, my whole body was shaking. Not from sadness. Not even from betrayal. I was furious. Steve thought he could cheat on me for 8 months, introduce our kids to his mistress, and then have the nerve to call me and act like this was just a misunderstanding? Oh no. Not a chance. I walked into the house, and the second I saw my kids, my babies, sitting on the couch watching TV, my stomach twisted. Because suddenly, I realized something. They had no idea. They had no clue that their entire world had just collapsed. That the man they loved, the man they called Dad, had been living a double life. I forced myself to smile. Hey guys. They barely looked up. Hi Mom. I swallowed hard. Can you go play in your rooms for a little bit? My oldest, 10-year-old Jake, frowned. Why? I hesitated. Mommy just needs a minute. He gave me a long look, because of course at 10, he was already starting to sense when something was wrong, but finally he nodded. He rounded up the younger two, and they all disappeared down the hall. The second they were gone, I collapsed onto the couch. And that's when the tears finally came. Ugly. Messy. Uncontrollable. Because it wasn't just about me. It was about them. How was I supposed to tell them? How was I supposed to sit them down and say, hey kids, guess what? Daddy's a liar. Daddy's been sneaking around with another woman for almost a year. Daddy has been betraying us this whole time. How do you break your children's hearts like that? My phone buzzed. Steve. Again. I snatched it off the table and answered, my voice hoarse. What do you want? He sighed. Emily, please. Can we just talk? I wiped at my face, trying to steady my breathing. Talk? Now you want to talk. I laughed. Where was all this talking when you were screwing someone else behind my back? Silence. I leaned forward, pressing my fingers to my temples. Steve, I don't even know where to start with you right now. Do you even understand what you've done? To me? To our family. I never wanted to hurt you. Something about that sentence made something in me snap. I sat up straight. Oh, but you did, Steve. You hurt me every single day for the past 8 months. And the worst part? You let me stand in our house and feel like I was the crazy one. You let me second-guess my own instincts. His breath was shaky. Emily, I am done, Steve. Silence. Then, softly, like he was genuinely realizing it for the first time. You're serious? I swallowed hard. Yeah. I am. He was quiet for so long that for a second, I thought he had hung up. But then finally he whispered, I don't want to lose my family. And for the first time in our entire marriage, I didn't care. I inhaled sharply. Too late. Then I hung up. And this time, I blocked his number after I hung up. I sat there staring at my phone, my hands still shaking. Blocked. For the first time since this nightmare started, I had control. Steve couldn't worm his way back in with empty apologies. He couldn't gaslight me into thinking this was something we could work through. He couldn't manipulate me into staying. Because I was done. But then, before I could even take a breath, there was a knock at the door. My heart stopped. I already knew who it was. I stood up slowly, wiped my face, and walked to the door. I didn't even hesitate. I swung it open. And there he was. Steve. Still wearing the same jeans from the hotel, his shirt wrinkled, his hair a mess. He looked like he had run here. His eyes searched mine, desperate. Emily, please. Just hear me out. I let out a slow breath. You have 60 seconds. His jaw tightened, like he wanted to argue, but he knew better. He ran a hand through his hair and exhaled. I messed up. I know I did. But I don't want this to be the end. I crossed my arms. The end of what, Steve? Our marriage. I shook my head. That ended the second you let another woman into our life. His face fell. It didn't mean anything. I actually laughed. Didn't mean anything? I stepped closer, voice sharp. You risked our home, our kids, our life, for something that didn't mean anything? Do you even hear yourself? His jaw clenched. I don't want to lose you, Emily. Then maybe, I whispered, you shouldn't have thrown me away. Steve flinched. I stared at him, waiting. Waiting for anything. For him to fight. For him to beg. But he just stood there. Silent. And in that moment, I knew. He wasn't sorry. He was just sorry he got caught. I let out a long breath, my heart pounding. I need you to leave, Steve. His head snapped up. Emily. Leave. His face twisted. Can I at least see the kids? Oh. So now he remembered them? I swallowed the rage bubbling in my throat. Not tonight. Not like this. Steve let out a shaky breath. He opened his mouth like he wanted to argue, but then finally he stepped back. For the first time, he actually listened. And as he turned and walked away, I felt something inside me shift. For the first time since this started. I felt free. I locked the door behind him and just stood there, forehead pressed against the wood, listening to the sound of his footsteps fading down the driveway. And that was it. 12 years. 3 kids. A whole life. Gone. I should have felt relieved. After all, I kicked him out. I was finally in control. No more excuses, no more late-night work meetings, no more gaslighting me into thinking I was paranoid. But instead, I felt like I was at a funeral. Because in a way, I was. I had just buried the illusion of my marriage. The lie I had been living for months, maybe years, was finally over. And even though I hated Steve, even though I wanted to set all his clothes on fire and throw his stuff in the street, a small broken part of me still whispered, how did we get here? I slid down to the floor, arms wrapped around my knees, my whole body trembling. I wanted to cry, but I had no tears left. I just felt empty. Then, a small voice. Mom. I snapped my head up. Jake was standing at the end of the hallway, his face half hidden in the shadows. I wiped at my face quickly. Yeah, buddy. He hesitated. Was that Dad? I forced a smile. Yeah. Jake shifted on his feet. Is he coming home? My throat tightened. What was I supposed to say? I couldn't just drop the full truth on a 10-year-old. I couldn't sit him down and say, no, sweetheart, Daddy has been sneaking around with another woman for 8 months, and he broke Mommy's heart, so now we're done forever. But I also couldn't lie. So I took a slow, shaky breath. Not tonight. Jake just stared at me. And for a second, I swore I saw something break in his expression, like some part of him already knew. He didn't ask anything else. He just nodded, turned around, and walked back to his room. And that was when I finally broke down. Because this wasn't just my heartbreak. It was theirs too. The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache. My eyes felt swollen, my whole body sore from crying. I rolled over in bed, half expecting to see Steve next to me out of habit. But he wasn't. And he never would be again. For the first time in years, my side of the bed felt like mine. I sat up slowly, rubbing my face, trying to pull myself together. The kids were already awake. I could hear the TV on in the living room, the low murmur of cartoons. And then, like a cruel joke, my phone buzzed. Steve. Of course. I stared at his name on the screen, my stomach twisting. I should have ignored it. I should have let it go to voicemail, let him sit in his guilt and suffer. But deep down I already knew, he wasn't calling to say sorry. He was calling to negotiate. I let out a slow breath, then picked up. What do you want? Steve hesitated. Then, Emily, we need to talk about the kids. Ah, there it was. He wasn't calling for me. He wasn't calling to beg or to explain. He was calling because now, he had to deal with the consequences. I got up from bed, pacing the floor. Oh, now you remember them? Steve sighed. Emily, please. Don't do this. Oh, I'm sorry, is this hard for you? My voice was sharp, mocking. Are you struggling, Steve? Is it difficult being a single man now? Silence. Then, Emily. I still want to be their father. That sentence. That one sentence. Like he thought I would actually take that away from him. I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tighter. Listen to me very carefully, Steve. You may have ruined our marriage, but you do not get to walk in and out of our kids' lives whenever you feel like it. I would never. You already did. Silence. I exhaled sharply, trying to steady my voice. If you want to see them, we're setting rules. You do not get to play weekend dad when it's convenient for you. You do not get to introduce them to your little side piece. And you do not get to come and go whenever you please. Got it? Another pause. Then, yeah. I got it. For the first time in this entire mess, I felt like I had power. I wasn't the wife begging for answers. I wasn't the woman crying on the floor. I was the one calling the shots now. I took a slow breath. Good. Now, you can see them this weekend. But I'll be there. We're doing this on my terms. Okay. I didn't say goodbye. I just hung up. And as I stood there, staring out the window at the empty driveway where his car used to be, I realized something. This wasn't just the end of my marriage. This was the beginning of my new life. And for the first time in a long, long time, I wasn't afraid of it. The thing about divorce, because let's be real, that's where this was heading, is that it isn't just about two people breaking up. It's about everything. The kids. The house. The money. And Steve? He might have been a cheating coward, but I knew him well enough to know he wasn't going down quietly. So I had two choices. I could play fair. Or I could play to win. Sat the kids down the next night, heart-pounding, trying to figure out how the hell I was supposed to do this without breaking their little hearts into a million pieces. Jake, my oldest, already had that quiet knowing look on his face. Ryan, 7, and Lily, 4, were just confused. I forced a smile. So, you guys probably noticed Daddy's not home right now. Ryan blinked. Is he at work? God, how do you explain this to a 7-year-old? I took a deep breath. No, honey. Daddy's staying somewhere else for a little while. Lily tilted her head. Like a sleepover? I swallowed hard. Kind of. Jake, my smart, too old for his age 10-year-old, narrowed his eyes. Are you and Dad getting a divorce? I nearly choked. Ryan and Lily both turned to me instantly. Crap. 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 I forced my voice to stay calm. We're figuring things out, buddy. Jake's face hardened. He wasn't stupid. He knew I was lying. But he didn't say anything. He just looked down at the table, pressing his lips together. Ryan, though? His little face crumpled. Is Daddy coming home? I felt my chest tighten. You'll still see Daddy, sweetheart. He loves you so much. It wasn't an answer. But it was the best I could do. And Lily, sweet, innocent, 4-year-old Lily, just smiled. Can we have pizza for dinner? Like none of it even mattered. I blinked back tears. Yeah, baby. We can have pizza. Friday rolled around, and Steve came over to see the kids. I was ready. I kept my face blank, my arms crossed, my voice cool and detached. Business mode. Because if Steve thought he was walking in here and playing world's best dad like nothing happened, he had another thing coming. He stood on the porch, hands shoved in his pockets. "Hey." I stepped aside. "They're inside." He hesitated, like he expected me to argue. Maybe even yell. I didn't. Because yelling meant I still cared. And I was done caring. The second he walked in, the kids swarmed him. "Daddy." And that hurt. Because they didn't know. They didn't know the pain. The betrayal. The absolute destruction of everything I had built with this man. To them, he was still daddy. And that was the part of this I hated the most. I stood back, watching him hug them, laughing like this was some kind of Hallmark movie. And then, because he just couldn't help himself, Steve looked at me over their heads and said, "Emily, can we talk?" I smiled. A cold, dead smile. "No." Steve exhaled, rubbing his jaw. No." My voice was calm. Final. "You're here for them. Not me." His face twisted. "It doesn't have to be like this." I tilted my head. "Oh? Should I be nicer to the man who lied to me for 8 months?" Steve glanced at the kids. Lowered his voice. Please." And that set me off. I stepped closer, my voice like steel. "You don't get to please me anymore, Steve. You made your choice. Now you live with it." He swallowed hard. Silent. "Good." I straightened. "Your hour's almost up." Because that was another rule. No more family time. No more, let's all hang out together for the kids' sake. Steve cheated on me for almost a year. He lost the right to be in my home for even a second longer than necessary. He spent the rest of the visit playing with the kids, avoiding my eyes. And when he left, I watched him go without a single ounce of regret. I thought I would feel sad. But all I felt was powerful. Because for the first time since this all started, I wasn't crying. He was dead. I should have seen it coming. Because, of course, she had to get involved. The next day, I was at the grocery store with Lily when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something told me to answer. I put it on speaker, tossing apples into the cart. "Hello." A nervous breath. Then, "Emily, please don't hang up. It's Lauren." I froze. Lauren. The other woman. Oh. I gave Lily a granola bar to distract her and stepped into an empty aisle. "You have 60 seconds. She exhaled, her voice shaking. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I had no idea Steve was married when we first met. He told me." I cut her off. "Lauren, let me stop you right there." Silence. I gripped my phone tighter. "You knew enough. You knew he had kids. You knew he was sneaking around, lying about where he was at night. Maybe you didn't know at first, but you knew enough to keep going. You were comfortable being the woman he snuck off to. So don't sit here and try to tell me you're innocent." More silence. Then softer. I feel awful, Emily. I didn't mean." I laughed. A sharp, humorless laugh. "Lauren," I said, my voice dead calm. "I don't care how you feel." And then? I hung up. Because her guilt wasn't my problem. And for the first time in this entire mess, I felt nothing but satisfaction. Steve had started this. But I was going to finish it. Because I wasn't just some heartbroken wife anymore. I was a woman with a plan. And Steve? He had no idea what was coming next. Steve thought I'd crumble. Thought I'd beg. Thought I'd make this easy. He was so wrong. 2 days after Lauren's pathetic call, Steve texted. "Steve, can we talk?" Me, "No." "Steve, Emily, please. Just 5 minutes." Me, "You had 8 months. You're out of time." Blocked. I wasn't playing his game anymore, the kids were adjusting, but Jake, he saw everything. One night, as I tucked him in, he whispered, "Are you and Dad ever getting back together?" My heart broke. I smoothed his hair. "No, sweetheart." His little face fell. And that's when I made a promise. To myself and my kids. Steve had taken enough from me. From us. I wasn't going to let him take any more. I called a lawyer the next morning. And as I signed the papers, one thought kept repeating in my head. This marriage isn't ending on Steve's terms. It's ending on mine. Filing for divorce felt surreal. 1 minute, Steve and I were a team. Partners. Parents. The couple who made it through sleepless nights, mortgage payments, and first days of school. And now? Now I was sitting in a lawyer's office, signing papers to make sure he had no control over my life ever again. I took the pen, hesitated for half a second, then signed my name. Emily Carter. The last time I would ever sign something as Steve's wife. When I walked out of that office, I expected to feel sad. I didn't. I felt lighter. Steve, of course, lost his mind. That same night, he called from a new number. I let it go to voicemail. Then he emailed. Subject: Emily, we need to talk. Body: you blindsided me with this. I thought we were figuring things out. Please don't make this ugly. Oh, Steve. You made it ugly. The second you chose her over us. I replied with a single sentence. Me: all communication will go through my lawyer from now on. Then I blocked him again. A few days later, I got a call from his mom. I debated ignoring it. But curiosity won. Her: Emily, sweetheart, do you really have to go through with this? I almost laughed. Me: did Steve tell you what he did? Silence. Of course he didn't. I took a deep breath. I'm not the bad guy here, Mary. Your son blew up our family. I'm just making sure I pick up the pieces the right way. More silence. Then, you know how he is, Emily. He made a mistake. I saw red. Me: a mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is not cheating for 8 months and introducing your kids to another woman. She had nothing to say to that. I hung up. Because if Steve thought he could use his mom to guilt me into stopping this divorce, he had another thing coming. The next week, my lawyer hit Steve with divorce papers and a custody agreement. No more last-minute visits. No more walking into my house like he still belonged there. He got weekends. No overnights for now. And Lauren? She was not allowed near my kids. Steve called again. I answered this time, just to hear him squirm. His voice was tight. You're really doing this? I smiled. I already did. Silence. Then: I don't want to lose my family. I exhaled, shaking my head. You already did. And this time, when I hung up, I didn't feel a single ounce of regret. I was done crying. I was done hurting. This wasn't just the end of my marriage. This was the beginning of me. And Steve? He was just a chapter. 1 was finally closing. T was funny, in a twisted way. I had spent years believing that Steve and I were unbreakable. That no matter how much we struggled, how tired we got, how much life threw at us, we were a team. And yet, here I was, a single mom, finalizing my divorce, dealing with a man who still couldn't accept that he had ruined everything. And Steve? He was unraveling. T had been 3 weeks since I filed for divorce. 3 weeks of lawyers, custody arrangements, and trying to act normal for the kids. Then one evening, as I was getting Lily ready for bed, there was a knock at the door. I knew who it was before I even checked. I opened the door, keeping my face blank. What do you want, Steve? He looked awful. Unshaven, bags under his eyes. Like he hadn't slept in days. Good. He shoved his hands in his pockets. Can we talk? I sighed. Make it quick. He hesitated, glancing past me into the house like he was trying to remember what home felt like. But that wasn't his home anymore. Finally, he spoke. I don't know how to do this, Emily. I crossed my arms. Do what? He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. Live without you. Without all of this. He motioned toward the house. Toward our life. I almost laughed. Oh, now you miss it. I tilted my head. Where was all this when you were sneaking around with Lauren? He flinched. It wasn't like that. I scoffed. It was exactly like that. His jaw clenched. Emily, I screwed up. I know that. But I'm still the father of your kids. I still love. Don't. I cut him off, my voice like steel. You don't get to say that to me. Not anymore. Steve swallowed hard. Can we at least try therapy? For the kids. I took a deep breath, then met his eyes. Therapy won't fix this, Steve. Nothing will. You threw us away. His face twisted in pain. But I didn't care. I stepped back, gripping the edge of the door. Your time's up. I'll see you for pickup on Saturday. He hesitated, looking like he wanted to say something. Something big, something desperate. But I didn't wait to hear it. I closed the door in his face. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel like the one losing something. I felt like I had finally won that night. I sat at the kitchen table with a glass of wine, staring at the divorce papers. It was all almost over. One final signature, and I would be free. And yet, a small part of me, some distant broken part, was still trying to make sense of it. How did we go from forever to this? How did the man I built a life with become a stranger? I took a deep breath. It didn't matter anymore. Steve had made his choice. And now, I was making mine. No more looking back. No more what-ifs. Just me, my kids, and a life without him. I picked up the pen. And with a steady hand, I signed my name for the last time as Mrs. Emily Carter. Then, I poured myself another glass of wine. Because I wasn't sad. I was finally freed the next morning. I dropped the signed papers off at my lawyer's office. And just like that, my marriage was officially over. A part of me wondered how Steve would react. Would he fight it? Would he try one last time to fix something unfixable? I didn't have to wait long to find out. That night, my phone rang. I almost ignored it. But then, at the last second, I answered. Me, what? Steve was quiet for a long moment. Then softly, "It's done, isn't it?" I closed my eyes. "Yes, Steve. It's done." Another long silence. Then, I never thought it would end like this. I let out a breath. Neither did I. And for the first time since this whole nightmare started, I heard it in his voice. Not anger. Not excuses. Just regret. But that wasn't my problem anymore. So I said the only thing left to say. "Goodbye, Steve." Then I hung up. And this time, I didn't look back for weeks. I had been living in the wreckage of my marriage. Now, I was walking away from it. I was free. I wasn't just the woman Steve cheated on. I wasn't just the wife he threw away. I was Emily Carter. And for the first time in years, I was ready to live again. The first morning after the divorce was official, I woke up to silence. No Steve snoring beside me. No tension hanging in the air. Just me. For the first time in years, I wasn't waking up as someone's wife. And instead of feeling empty, I felt alive. I took the kids out for breakfast. Just us. No fake family moments. No awkward conversations. No pretending things were normal when they weren't. Jake was still watching me. I could tell he wanted to ask, "What happens now?" So, over pancakes and orange juice, I smiled and said, "We're going to be okay." And for the first time, I meant it that night. After the kids were asleep, my phone buzzed. I almost didn't check. But curiosity won. A message from Steve. "Steve, I hope you're happy." I laughed. Out loud. Because for the first time in a long time, I was. I didn't respond. I just blocked him. For good, people always say the hardest part of leaving is actually leaving. But they're wrong. The hardest part is staying gone. Not letting loneliness pull you back. Not letting memories trick you into missing someone who broke you. And I wasn't going back. Not now. Not ever. One night, a few months later, I stood in my kitchen, drinking wine, listening to music, and just being. No stress. No pain. No betrayal lingering in the air. Just me. Emily Carter. Not someone's wife. Not someone's backup plan. Just a woman who survived. And as I danced barefoot in my kitchen, wine glass in hand, I realized something. I wasn't just moving on. I had already moved.